Hello and welcome to the Inside Risk and Compliance podcast. I'm your host, Adam Spencer, Director of AJ Fox Compliance, a specialist recruitment agency focusing on all things law firm risk and compliance. I have seen so many people carve amazing and fulfilling careers in this space, and it really has been a pleasure speaking to people who enjoy doing what they do every day. However, one thing that has really stood out to me is how hard it can be for people to access the bigger picture outside of their team, outside of their firm. We created this podcast to share with you some of the insights, experiences, and stories of the most interesting people succeeding inside risk and compliance. In this episode, we're joined by Eloise Butterworth, Senior Associate in the Risk and Compliance team at Anstey and a top 25 legal LinkedIn influencer, to talk about career change, communication, and carving out your own path in compliance. Eloise shares the personal journey that led her from family law to burnout and ultimately to a more sustainable and fulfilling role in risk and compliance. Along the way, she built a career from the ground up, lobbying her way into her first compliance role, leading change projects, and embracing the challenges of solo and team-based roles. We explore the importance of self-awareness, storytelling, and speaking your stakeholders' language, and how LinkedIn became not just a creative outlet, but a powerful tool for training, connection, and community building. Whether you're just entering the profession or looking to reignite your purpose, Eloise's story is a brilliant reminder that there's no one way to succeed, but many ways to thrive. Enjoy. Eloise, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So for the benefit of our audience, can you just give us a little bit of an idea of who you are and what you're doing at the moment, and then we'll deep dive into how you got there?
Sure. So I'm a senior associate in the risk team at Anstey. I'm an all-round compliance specialist and legal linked influencer.
Awesome. We'll be keen to hear a bit more about that in due course as well. But you haven't always worked in risk and compliance. So what was your journey like to get into the world of risk and compliance?
My journey into law started 18 years ago, the day after I sat my last A-level exam.
Okay. Yeah.
I interviewed for an office junior role at a really tiny law firm local to where I live.
Yeah.
After applying for all different jobs, and that was the only one I got an interview for. And I've been in law ever since. So I've been an office junior, a receptionist, a secretary, a PA, a paralegal. All of that was in family law.
Okay.
Public, private, children, matrimonial finance. And then in 2020, I made the switch to risk and compliance.
Okay. So before you made that switch, were you on a particular journey? When you said you went from receptionist to legal secretary, junior legal secretary, paralegal.
Yeah. I was on a long journey. I was studying, I already decided I wanted to qualify via the SILEX route. So that's what I was working towards at the time.
Yep. How was that?
That was good. I'm a big advocate for that route to qualification. Obviously, it looks slightly different now, but that took me 4 or 5 years whilst working full time. Gave me loads of hands-on experience, loads of practical experience, no debt. And
that's a massive bonus.
Winning. But I was really fixated on the end goal of the journey, and I didn't really stop along the way to evaluate if that was actually what I wanted or or the specialism that I wanted to qualify into.
It's a really common thing as well for people just to be sort of on blinkers straight in one direction.
Yeah, I think you had Charlotte on here and she said a really similar thing. Basically someone told me I couldn't do it, so I was like, right, okay. So then the blinkers were well and truly on, so I can't lie, when I qualified I just didn't really feel anything.
Did you expect something to change literally as the point at which you qualified?
Yeah, I think I did. And I remember just like you at the time, you just got an email when your portfolio was signed off by SILEX. So an email just popped up in my inbox and I was like, oh, I've done it. Now what? It was just so anticlimactic, which sounds awful because it was like 4 or 5 years of my life, so much like blood, sweat, tears, plenty of tears went into it. But yeah, it just didn't really feel like I was expecting. That was probably the the start of the end of that part of my career.
I can totally identify with it because I can't remember if I've mentioned it on the podcast before. I had the exact same experience. So I qualified with a firm and I fought a little bit, I guess, to get my NQ role. And it was the same thing. I thought as soon as I become an NQ or I get told I've got a slot as an NQ, my life will be fixed. And it was the same thing. It was that anticlimax. And I don't know whether I'd really thought about what I was expecting to feel like, other than that it should feel right, it should feel good, and it wasn't how I expected it to feel. So what did you start thinking at that point? Where did your brain go? Did you have a backup plan at that point?
No backup plan. So I probably skipped around for a bit and made excuses, and I thought, oh well, once I have my own caseload, then I'll feel differently, or once I have this, or once I start doing more advocacy, or whatever it might look like, those feelings will change, and they didn't. So I did the really healthy thing of absolutely burying myself in work.
The standard procedure.
Right? Yeah. So in terms of client work, extra work, I was chair of Bournemouth and District Silex at that time. BD stuff. I switched firms. I threw the kitchen sink at distractions. And then come spring 2020, when obviously the world came to a bit of a standstill, everything came crashing down.
Do you want to go into that in a bit more detail?
So, I think anyone that has, gone through that experience of just absolutely burying themselves in work for whatever reason, either because they like it or because they feel like they have to, or because of the expectation on them, or whatever the cause might be, it does catch up with you eventually. You really can only run from it for so long. And I ignored all of the warning signs in the preceding, I don't even know now, 6, 12, 18 months. I probably longer than I realise. And then as we all regressed into home working and isolation and thinking time, that's when it just all came crashing down pretty spectacularly. And I laugh about it now, but not funny. Not funny, not healthy. Wouldn't recommend it. It was a difficult time.
I think it's a common journey for people to go on. I think it's both metaphorically and literally. It's like in law especially, I think the fallacy of sunk costs applies so much, because people have mentally invested so much in a career path, and there's that. It's very hard to imagine leaving behind some of that mental investment, and then you get the financial investment at the same time if you manage to do it without debt. But we speak to a lot of people who've got that debt as well, and it feels very hard to see a different direction to go in. So how did that situation end up with actually the silver lining, the happy pivot to the world of risk and compliance? Was it something that had ever been on your radar in your time during family law?
No.
So how did you find out about it?
Good old list.
Yeah.
Good old list. Things I like, things I don't like, things I'm good at, things I'm not good at. Nothing was off the table. I was reasonably confident I was going to leave law altogether. Yeah. Because you feed into that narrative, maybe it's not for me. Yeah. And I'd worked at a couple of different firms at that point, so I thought, well, the issue's not the firm. So I just didn't rule anything out. I wrote lists. I looked into all sorts. I looked into financial services industry, insurance, and other legal sector roles. And to be perfectly honest, the reason why I stayed in the legal sector is because it was a really bad time to quit your job. A really bad time to quit your job. Yep. And as a happy coincidence, a compliance role came up at the firm that I was already working in. It was a compliance team of one. The one person that did it left. Yeah. And there was a recruitment freeze at the time. So they said, we're not filling it. And I thought, well, I think you probably should fill it. So I wrote a business plan as to why they should fill that role internally, and that wouldn't breach their recruitment freeze that they'd put in place. And basically lobbied myself into that job, and that's where it all started. And
it worked.
Yeah,
and it got you in. Yeah. So was it already on the list? Because I was going to say it's great approach to build a list. The question I would have is how how did you know that risk and compliance could be something on that list? Because most of the time people just don't really know about the world of risk and compliance. Or did you see the opportunity, look at it and go, hang on, actually, this is in line with a lot of what's on our list?
It was more reverse engineered.
Yeah.
I wanted something analytical. I wanted something that was not very emotional, coming from a family law background. I did not want people to cry to me every day. I didn't want that like emotional responsibility for whatever role I was doing. Because there's a lot of heavy stuff that goes with those sorts of practice areas. And I wasn't quite ready to turn my back on legal. Like I thought, I really thought about it, but like in my heart of hearts, I just felt like I would have been, walking away prematurely. So it kind of ticked all the boxes.
And you had a lot of transferable skill sets, right? And even, especially doing it internally, it's not just the more generic transferable skill sets. You've got knowledge of the business and the firm, right?
Yeah, that definitely helped. I think it would have been a completely different experience if I'd gone into like a risk and compliance role at a new firm. But I was in a firm where I'd already worked for a couple of years and I was happy, and they weren't super big. So, I knew everybody. I stayed in the same office. Their processes, I'd gone through them as a fee earner, so now I was looking at them from the other side of the lens. That definitely smoothed over. But even then, I didn't know I was going to like it, let alone love it.
So how was the transition, and was it what you expected it to be? Did it fit into the business plan you'd made for it? Did you arrive in the job and go, oh, hang on, this is a bit different? Or?
Yeah, because when I started writing that business plan, I was like, oh, this is quite a big task. This is quite a big job. Because, I started branching out beyond AML and all the other risks, and the firm had grown quite considerably in the preceding couple of years, and probably hadn't quite caught up on the operational side of the business to support that growth. So I could instantly see like the scope there was for that team and that specialism. And obviously I'd worked at Leicester Aldridge previously prior to that role, where they already had an established risk and compliance team of over half a dozen people. So I knew what it could look like in a firm of a certain size, and how that could potentially be replicated on a smaller scale. So, I had that insight already.
And what did your role consist of from a day-to-day perspective in that first foray into risk and compliance?
Well, I kind of made it not made it up as I went along, but basically
you have to adapt, right?
So my predecessor was really she was a GDPR specialist. So although she was a compliance officer, her primary focus was on that data protection, GDPR, information security management side, which I really had zero experience of, and teaching yourself the GDPR is a barrel of laughs. But obviously I wanted to bring in the financial crime and other risk aspects. So that role gave me the opportunity to just develop with it.
Yes.
And I grew and it grew, and I changed paths and it changed paths. And it was just a really good opportunity to find my feet, find which sort of sub-specialisms were more my bag. It just gave me, it was a really good entry-level role. But obviously being a team of one was not ideal. Yeah,
I was going to say, what were the challenges of being a team of one? Because presumably you still had, were there other subject matter experts in the business to some extent? You wouldn't have held the MLRO role.
Yeah, no. So there were, but they were all partners doing other fee earning roles. So the Colt worked in corporate, and the MLRO worked in commercial property, and the data protection officer worked in the regulatory team. So there were all those subject matter experts there, but obviously they were wearing many hats, and that sort of split attention. So that kind of, it gave me an opportunity to really get my teeth stuck in, to be like, oh, how can I help them? What can I do to make this work better? I think, we're moving away from a time where that model works so well now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how you can do those roles properly anymore, 5 years later. I think that's a real big ask of your partners if you're saying, run the corporate team, but be our Colt.
Yeah, I think there must be an inherent conflict immediately if you're both responsible for generating fee income from work, but also deciding whether you should bring it on in the first place. You've got, that could be quite challenging. But you did that for about a year, right? And was it during that time that you realised you were going to stay in risk and compliance, or did you just think, I'll keep doing this for now, maybe go find something else a bit bigger? Or did you realise during that time that this was going to be your career path?
Yeah, no, I realised pretty quickly that it was definitely going to be for me. And then I started to really think what that was going to look like longer term.
What made you, because it's great, you obviously had the previous experience of following that fee earning career path and realising it wasn't right. What was it that made you realise risk and compliance was right?
I'm not really sure. It's more of a gut feeling.
Yeah.
I think it worked with my natural skill set and my natural personality type. And some of those characteristics used to work against me in family because I was overly empathetic or too invested, which in those sorts of settings is not really a very positive attribute to have.
Yes.
Or not very sustainable.
Makes it hard for you, right?
Yeah. So it was more a case of I didn't have to fight my natural instincts. Like to do what I was doing, which just then gave me so much more energy and scope to like really get my teeth stuck in.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. So then, how did you move on from that role? What was next?
And
that's when you go to Leicester Aldridge, right?
Yeah, they missed me and they wanted me back. I think that's the story. Obviously I'd worked at Leicester Aldridge for 7 or 8 years. That's where I qualified. I was a baby when I went there. I was 21 when I joined. And someone that I'd previously worked with in the family team had also switched over to risk and compliance during the pandemic. So we reunited in the compliance function in a firm that I knew really well and in a function that was really well established. I think by that point I realised I needed to be with a team. Otherwise, it was going to be like limits.
What was that like, joining and having resource? Suddenly, you're not, doing everything.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. And again, that role, changed and developed and grew over the 3 years that I was there, and I was fortunate enough to be given quite a lot of free rein on what I did and what I wanted that to look like and how far I could go with that. So yeah, definitely being in that bigger environment, more better resourced environment was hugely beneficial.
I just wanted to take a moment out to thank our amazing sponsor, the International Compliance Association. The ICA are the leading professional body for the global regulatory and financial crime community, offering professional qualifications, world-class events and training. Go check them out online, and if any of the certificates or courses take your fancy, then you can get 10% discount using our code AJFox10 at checkout. On the opposite side, though, were there challenges that came suddenly from, helping other more junior people?
Yeah, I hadn't managed a team before. So many mistakes were made along the way, undoubtedly. But yeah, it was just a good opportunity. We implemented central client onboarding. That's a big thing to do. We implemented tech for the first time. That's a big thing to do. We did all of that in the first year that I came back. So we were just really given the scope to get stuck in and really think about how we could improve that side of the business, both for our fee earners and client experience.
Yeah, and was the in terms of centralizing things, was that already signed off before you joined? Or was it a process you went through when you joined?
It was on the agenda. I think the managing partner was keen on it, but no one had really scoped out what it was going to look like, how you even get going with a project like that. It's not an insignificant project. How you resource it, how many people you need, all the tech that goes with it, the process side, the operational side. It was, that was a steep learning curve.
Yeah. And what was the reception to that amongst the fee earner population? Was it mixed? Were there people who were super pro the idea of centralisation? Were there some that were worried it was going to stop them taking on work they wanted to take on? Or?
Yeah, no, the reception was really good. I think they had a really good culture there in terms of the compliance function and the risk function. There's always going to be, lawyers don't like change, do they? There's always going to be a bit of pushback, and especially when you're saying, can you give up control of your file opening process? Then obviously some teams and some work types and some people are more demanding challenging than others in terms of the turnaround times and their expectations. But generally it was like pretty smoothly. We did a phased rollout, so we didn't do a big bang. We did a phased team by team rollout with carefully selected teams.
Interesting.
To make sure that we'd stress tested it. It's impossible to think of everything when you're going to roll out like a project as big as that. So yeah, we did like a phased rollout.
That sounds quite interesting then. So then by the time you're maybe moving on to some of the more demanding teams, did you have great feedback from other teams to help you?
Yeah, and then the chatter starts and you get the buy-in, and then people are like, oh, when are we going to get this? And oh, we hear you're doing that for that team. And, you know, you can build that hearts and minds piece almost starts building itself, which is then like one less thing that you need to do to be like, guys, this is a good idea. So yeah, that worked really successfully. Like for the size of the firm, it worked.
That sounds really interesting. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah,
Did you enjoy that process?
It was good. There's things I'd do differently if I did it again now, inevitably. But
what sort of things would you do differently?
It was good. It was the first time I'd done anything in like risk and compliance that was so business orientated. Like I'd never worked in ops, and there wasn't a project manager on it. There wasn't, you know, now I'm in a bigger firm again. You know, you get so much resource from change and innovation or whatever you call them. Whereas actually, me and the head of the compliance team, you know, we were managing that process ourselves, when to bring in IT, all of the tech side. That's like a completely different skill set to advising on AML or just saying, yeah, this process meets our regulatory obligations, but how's it going to work? What's it going to cost? How do we implement it? How many bodies do we need? Who's going to train them? Who's going to manage them? Like,
how did you adapt to that then?
I don't know, really. Flew by the seat of my pants. But it was good because the thing is, the one thing that I was worried that I'd miss when I left family law is that, like, I had no idea what's going to come across my desk from day to day, what was going to be mega urgent, what curveball you'd get if you were going to get a call from the court to be like, you need to be here at 2:00, and you're like, oh. Okay. And that was the side that I was like, maybe I can't replicate that in another specialism, but actually I learned quite quickly, like, compliance replicates that really well. I have no idea what's coming across my desk, and I might say that that's annoying, but like deep down I love it. Yeah,
definitely. The every day's different, right? Yeah. And then you moved on from that role to your current role. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm a couple of months into a new role at a bigger firm again. So you know, when you're dealing with people, even the step up from 300 people to 450 people to 750 people, like it doesn't sound like huge increases, but the impact that then has on the processes and the delivery and the interaction with the firm. So this is posing like a new challenge in that regard. And I'm focusing more. So I was a generalist before: claims, complaints, financial crime, anything that doesn't have a home, probably was on my desk at some point. Whereas now, in a bigger team again, you know, I sit within the risk and audit function. So financial crime, code of conduct, conflicts, that side of thing. No more claims and complaints.
You're glad to be rid of claims and complaints. Do you think it's been an advantage? Do you think it's set you up career-wise to have had such a broad foundation?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really glad that I spent those 3 years in like a generalist role, and I wouldn't rule out going back to a generalist role. I think it gives you a really good grounding from an oversight perspective, because they are all intertwined, and I think you need to have a solid understanding of all of them. Depending on the size of the firm, the bigger the firm you go, the more that they're going to be split out. But if you're looking to work in like regional firms, then I think you need to have like that full knowledge across the board. Yeah,
and from where we sit, we tend to see it's just always important as you go up the chain, because even if you find yourself in a specialist role, it's just so valuable to have that wider understanding of what the bigger risk and compliance function is doing. And I know one of the things we were talking about before the podcast was you know, best practices and things that help risk and compliance teams function well. And one of the things you'd mentioned was the importance of humanising compliance. What exactly do you mean by that? And can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I can't really take the credit for coming up with the tagline, because it's actually what someone else told me I do, and sometimes if you want to know what you do or what you're good at, the easiest thing is to ask someone else. Totally. So a close friend of mine in marketing said, "Well, what you do is you humanize compliance," and I was like, "Oh, okay, do I?" I think what he meant was you turn all the gobbledygook regulations, you just throw in a few emojis and you put it on LinkedIn and it vaguely makes sense to people. But yeah, the thing is, there's obviously the technical side of the job, which is not going to be of interest to 90% of the people that you're going to be interacting with in your firm on a day-to-day basis. But we're kind of the bridge between the regulator and the regulations, and what our teams are doing on the ground. And that does involve quite a significant translation piece, because, it's the same as if I start telling you like about a piece of case law, you're probably like, I don't care. But if I'm like, Adam, what this means for you is for your business or your marriage or your home, like this is the problem and this is where the risk is, you'll be like, oh, so maybe I do care about that case, but you just don't want the like summary of what it's about. It's the same with the regs. People want to know, like, what should I be worried about? What do you actually want me to do?
Yes.
And why? They don't want that whole chapter and verse. They're not going to be those subject matter experts. They don't need to be.
No. And is there a strategy around that? Is it a lot of storytelling?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't even really... I think because I've sat on both sides of it, there are things where, there might be a technical discussion. I'm like, Fiona's not going to care about that, because I'm instantly like, I wouldn't have cared about that, or I wouldn't have worried about that, or I wouldn't have come at it from that angle. So obviously there's that experience to draw on, which helps in those situations. But I think in a world where obviously all the talk is tech and AI and I don't know, maybe the robots coming for my job, I don't know, but it's the things that they can't do, and they can't interact with people in the way that people can. So how I'm explaining it to you is not how I'm going to explain it to the head of corporate. It's not how I'm going to explain it to my general counsel. It's not. You have to be able to adapt your messaging, even if the point you're making is the same point, depending on who you're working with. And that's when that fails, that's when compliance fails and everyone goes, ugh.
This is sort of like KYC for your audience, right? Know your audience and what is going to be important to them. It's interesting. We've worked with firms where, maybe they've had a compliance manager in or a compliance professional in who's left, and now they're looking at updating policies and procedures. And it might be that the previous professional wasn't necessarily the most commercially aware. Maybe they were an ex-lawyer, and so they've written beautiful policies, but they're enormous and unwieldy, and they probably don't do exactly what you mentioned, which is just tell the individuals what do they need to do. Otherwise, they're not going to do it, right? No one's going to sit and read a 100-page policy. And you mentioned also that the person who gave you this insight about yourself flagged the fact that you create that clarity in LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
And I know that's another thing we wanted to talk about today is you're really vocal on LinkedIn. And you've recently been... what do you call it? Awarded, or you've been ranked as a top. Have you got an actual ranking?
Number 25.
Number 25. So not your top 25 LinkedIn influencer.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Why do you think you have attained that? Is it something that's important to you? Do you think it's something that's important to risk and compliance?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of how it came about, it's probably a good 15 months worth of work in terms of like consistent posting. I think March 2024-ish, I sort of made the decision like, I'm going to give this a whirl. I think the first ranking report had come out and I'd seen it and I thought, I wonder what that's about. And, for me, it's like a creative outlet. The compliance role is really interesting. It's really varied. It is creative from like a creative thinking point of view, strategy, that side of things, but it's not creative in the like traditional sense of the word. And I'm quite a creative person. So it gave me that creative outlet to talk about what I do, but in a completely different way. And then it's just sort of built momentum slowly but surely. I sort of crept up the rankings from quarter to quarter. Had quite a lot of support from Simon, who creates the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
He really wanted like diverse voices across across the profession, and there wasn't really many other compliance people really featuring, because a lot of people think if I'm not trying to win clients or I don't want a new job, then I don't need to do LinkedIn, which is obviously like a really tunnel vision way of looking at the platform, because the connections that you can form on there and the community that you can create both within your specialism and wider than that is invaluable. You know, something comes out, an SDT decision's released, the LSAG guidance comes up, I literally have someone I can pick up the phone to be like, oh my God, have you seen this? Like, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? Have you thought about this? Have you had this happen? You know, those conversations, which, fine, I'm in a bigger team now, but a lot of my contacts are maybe on their own or one of two. I've been in that position before. Who do you talk to those things about?
Yes.
You know? So it provides that, and it provides like an ability to impact the conversations that are happening behind closed doors, that you think, who decides that? Who, you know, who makes that a thing, or who decides that agenda? And it puts you in rooms that you don't even know exist, let alone that you want to be in, just from spouting your views on things online and remembering that lots of people read them.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Have you found it seeping into your day-to-day role? You know, have you found yourself having to go and have a conversation with a fee earner who might actually be more aware of you because of LinkedIn activity, or not yet?
Yeah, definitely. I have had, you know, all sorts of people be like, oh, I know you from LinkedIn. Like, the funniest thing is when they say they know you, and I'm like, do I know you? But, you know, in all different settings, you come across people, or someone will be like, oh, I saw your post about such and such. And actually someone at my last firm, she was an NQ, and she just said to me one day, oh, it all just clicks when I read your LinkedIn posts. And that's when I was like, oh, this is part of a training piece, as well as, because you also attend my in-person AML training that goes on for 90 minutes and you read the policy that I wrote. But actually what you're saying that's making it click is that really short, pithy drip of information. And there's not many ways to provide that internally. There's not really the right platform to provide that just internally.
But do you find that having that creative outlet of LinkedIn for those posts, does that actually also help you formulate your training methodology and how to train people internally?
It's definitely like a circular process. And then one gives you ideas, which leads on to a new problem, which then I'm like, oh, there's a post in that. And then you start again, and then other people obviously engage, and they'll say, well, we do this, or we've tried this, or I really hate it when people, you know, say this or call us this. I think compliance humour is obviously a bit niche, but those posts do quite well on LinkedIn. They're some of my better ones in terms of engagement. But then you realise that actually everyone's experiencing the same issues on the ground. Small firm, big firm, city firm, regional firm. Their headaches are the same headaches. They might be on a different scale. They might have different resources to address them, but the headaches are the same. And that really, you know, drives that sense of community.
It's something I really like about this space is the fact that it's not really you're not really competing with other firms.
No, exactly.
You know, there's a collaborative element to it, which is really, really nice. From a risk perspective, we've been speaking to a fair few people more recently about commercial and reputational risk. On the flip side, have you started seeing, you know, fee earners using LinkedIn? I feel like that's probably massively underutilized at the moment. Does that start to land into your world of risk and compliance of, you know, how is the fee earner population using LinkedIn to generate work, and do they need parameters to work within? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of people that I speak to about LinkedIn, they'll say, oh, I love your LinkedIn post. I can never do that. And I'm like, why? Why couldn't you do it? You know, you write every day. You write emails, you write letters, you write pleadings, you write court applications. You can write a couple of 100 characters, put in a smiley face and post it online. Like, you know, it's well within your capabilities, but actually it stems from the fear of judgment, the fear of, well, what if I say something I'm not meant to say? And so I think when people see compliance professionals posting and, even like the SRO investigators post,
yeah.
you know, then you think, well, if they can do it, I can do it. As long as you're working within the parameters of, you know, most firms now will have a social media policy.
Yeah.
What you put online, be it LinkedIn, your personal social media accounts, obviously has regulatory implications. What I normally say to people is just set yourself your own framework that you're comfortable operating within. That's how I started in terms of how many times I'm going to post, topics I'm going to cover, topics I am never going to cover, you know, where the line is between personal and professional for me, which might not be where it is for someone else. And if you set yourself a framework as a proper risk person, just love a framework, then you've given yourself like the guardrails to like get started.
Yeah.
And then as you build your confidence, you realize you don't need those guardrails. But it just gives you that confidence to get going.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really good advice. And talking of advice, look, you've had an amazing career. You're in the middle of an amazing career. If we've got people listening who are maybe at the beginning of a risk and compliance career path, maybe they're about to or trying to get into their first risk and compliance role, what advice might you give them from the journey you've been on to help them get the most out of their career path?
I think where I went wrong when I entered the profession, and I entered the profession really young, I was 18. Now we have like solicitor apprenticeships, you know, that people are entering the profession much younger than just graduates. You're not really prepared for that environment for a start. And what I was definitely guilty of is I identified people that I thought were successful or that I liked or that I respected, and then decided that I needed to squash myself in that mold of what they were or what it was about them that I deemed to be successful. So I spent an awful long time in a square peg round hole situation, rather than self-reflecting on, well, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I might struggle with and I need to work on. And these are things that are probably never really going to be my bag. And then how does that fit in with what success looks like to me? You can't, or rarely can you emulate someone that you respect because you're not them. You probably have different background, different experiences, different personality types, academic capabilities. You can't replicate it. And so I think it's that self-reflection of what you want from your career, what success looks like to you, what type of lawyer or professional you want to be. And that's hard when you're young.
Was there a good tool you had to help? Well, lists, you said, right?
Yes,
was there a tool to get through that? Was there anything else? Or did you have any inspirational books or anything that helped you reflect? Or did you just hit a moment where you realised you had to sit down?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come with age and experience. Definitely, things falling apart. They are lessons learned the hard way. If you can learn them the easy way, that's what I would recommend. I definitely recommend speaking to colleagues and peers and friends. Professional support can help. I had therapy at that time. That was quite an eye-opening experience. But I think platforms like LinkedIn now, people are so much more open about this is what happened. These are the mistakes I made. So people have those warning signs earlier. Whereas back in the day, you didn't really talk about it. When I burnt out, I just felt like that meant that I wasn't cut out for the law because I burnt out. And actually now there were so many other people burning out at exactly the same time as I was from really similar things. And I had no idea. Yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it? Some of those environments, they reward a mentality where people will burn out but blame themselves. Because that mentality keeps going and keeps fearing, and doesn't question it, but stepping away from it. It sounds like a really good experience you went through to have that self-reflection. So that sounds like really, really helpful advice. So if anyone is listening and is feeling a little bit stuck, it sounds like go sit down with a list, do some self-reflection,
get some nice
and then
stationery.
Jump into risk and compliance. Awesome. Well, Eloise, that's been so interesting. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great having you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
We really hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it. If you did, please do us a huge, huge favour and share it with a friend or a colleague. The more people we can get listening, the more time and energy we can get into recording more episodes and getting the best guests and the most interesting stories and insights. I want to say a huge thank you to the ICA for their support, to Ty and Karem here in the studio, and a massive thanks to Kat for making sure everything runs so smoothly behind the scenes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on LinkedIn to make sure you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.